I have three separate opinions, perhaps contradictory opinions, about Three Identical Strangers. This is a documentary. I watched it on Netflix and it sounded incredible and I was really excited to watch it. And I have three main thoughts, one of which will contain spoilers, so I'll discuss that towards the end. But just basically, the first three thoughts are, one, this is not really as sinister as advertised, but it is quite creepy. Two, as a documentary, it did some things very well, but some things, particularly with the pacing, not very good. And the third thing is that regardless of what anybody watching this thinks, the documentary, what it has done for the people involved, is pretty amazing. So even if this was the worst documentary ever, which it absolutely is not, what it's done in the outcome for the identical strangers and others involved is amazing. And I will talk about that at the end when I give a spoiler warning. So I'll read the description from IMDb. And this says, in 1980 New York, three young men who were all adopted meet each other and find out they're triplets who were separated at birth. But their quest to find out why turns into a bizarre and sinister mystery. And as I said, I don't think it's quite as sinister as I thought, but that it by no means is it bland. It takes a very bizarre turn very quickly and it becomes very fascinating. I don't think it's sinister, but it's certainly questionable. And as I said, I won't say what that is until later on. So this is directed by Tim Wardle, and it focuses initially on these three identical strangers. And this looks at three boys who were 19 at the time, who had all been separated at birth, and it looks at how they met. And the reason they met is pretty incredible. It's an insane encounter. One person's decision to go to one particular college on one particular year. And if that hadn't happened, this documentary probably wouldn't ever exist. And because of this chance encounter, they find out that they're twins. And then they find out that there's a third brother and that they're triplets. And that was interesting. I thought this was really fascinating. But we don't need 40 minutes or something about this encounter. And that's kind of my main issue with this, is that it takes a very long time to get to the apparently bizarre and sinister bit. The setup is quite slow, and I started to think, I'm going to keep going with this, but if it doesn't get to something interesting soon, I might switch off. And thankfully I kept going and it was worth waiting for. But the setting up is far too long. Yes, we need time to get to know the brothers and get to know their own individual backgrounds, because they all got adopted into kind of slightly different circumstances, different household incomes, they have slightly different upbringings. I will say the documentary had access to a wealth of archive footage, home videos. We really get to see each of the boys growing up and the different lives that they had. And that is amazing. When a documentary has that much footage to work with, they can do some great things. And I do think the editing was very good. Everything blended well together, and they used a really good mix of clips that always made sense with what was being said in the voiceover or the narration. That's not always the case with documentaries, so I'm kind of glad about that. So as an actual documentary, as a form of art, I think it told the story well. We just needed to have the pacing a little bit differently. I think they could have cut out at least 10 minutes, maybe 15 of the first half. And then we get to the interesting bit, and it is not what I was expecting. So there will be some spoilers from now, but I suggest if you haven't seen this, you don't listen to me continue talking, you watch it, you stick with the first half. It's interesting for about 15-20 minutes, but then it drags for another maybe 10-15 minutes, and then it gets really fascinating. I'd say stick with it, watch it, and don't read anything about it before you watch it, because I didn't read anything other than that caption on IMDb, which is very similar to the caption on Netflix. That's all I had, and I was shocked. So, spoilers from now. What happened is that the three strangers, the triplets, don't know why I lost that word, the triplets had been separated at birth from this Jewish adoption agency as part of a scientific study. And that is horrific. I can't imagine giving up a child, against your will, really. But 3 children, and finding out that they're being separated at birth without knowing about the other 2 brothers, and being subjected to constant visits and tests from a very young age, you not knowing why, the adoptive parents not knowing the true reason why, and being put through this rigmarole as a scientific experiment. They were used as human toys. And that is horrific. Yes, if you consent to that, perfectly fine. But they obviously didn't consent. The adoptive parents didn't consent. The mother didn't consent. The birth mother. And that is deceitful, sick, twisted. It's absolutely horrible. And the documentary reveals that it didn't just happen to these triplets, it happened to a few others as well. We do actually have some words from a few people involved in this so-called experiment. And it's interesting to hear from people who were involved in it, not in charge of it, but involved in it in some way. And it's shocking because these triplets and the others involved, their lives could have been so different. Maybe not better, maybe not worse, but their lives were determined by this decision to experiment on these babies and young children as they were growing up. And yes, it's fascinating. Who wouldn't want to find out if there is a difference between nature and nurture, or if we have preconditioned qualities that our upbringing and environment can't affect? It's an age-old question. And yes, we'd love to get a definitive answer, but experimenting on 6-month-old babies is not the way to do that. It's disgusting. And I won't say what happens at the very, very, very end. We have some credits with some really interesting things, but I have to say, as I said, the documentary, even if it was the worst thing ever, the outcome for the triplets and the others involved would have made it all worth it. And that kind of choked me up a little bit. It really is brilliant. So, as I said, remove the pacing. It's pretty good. It's not as sinister as I expected, but it still is very, very questionable. Would I recommend it? Yeah, I absolutely would. It's been on my watch list for a little while. It was released in 2018, and I'm glad I finally got around to watching it. As a documentary, it's well edited. The narrative is well presented, particularly the second half when we get into the details of this so-called study. We have a lot of footage used at the right times. The pacing of the second half is very good. It's very, very packed full of information, but not in a way that's overwhelming. The first half, as I said, very slow, interesting to begin with, slows down a little bit, but then picks up pace again. I absolutely would watch 3 Identical Strangers. I'm glad I watched it because I now feel more informed about something I knew nothing about. It will make you question a lot. And it's just shocking that this could have ever happened at all.